अब बुला लो क्या?
Uh, and if
हाँ,
possible for everyone to turn on their cameras, it would be
yes,
really appreciated.
yes.
Madhu,
Oh,
I guess
hi,
ma'am is here.
ma'am. Yeah, I'm just texting. Good morning, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us so early in the morning.
Of course. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. We are so happy to have you here. We are just waiting for a few more participants to join and then we can begin, if that's all
Great.
right with you. So
Happy
how are
Friday.
you, ma'am? Yeah, how are
I'm
you, ma'am?
I'm doing well. I have my morning coffee. I know we're on the opposite side of the world, so it's about
Yes.
eight over here. So how are your Fridays?
Yeah, it's going great, ma'am. We are really excited. And ma'am, I wanted you to meet Kunal, who is the secretary of the Sundarban's house in Bhairavi. We three were working towards this session, and these two are like my two closest friends in the degree, and we have been working together for a long time. So yeah.
Good
Hi,
morning,
ma'am.
ma'am. Good morning.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. Such an honor.
Yes.
Same here, ma'am.
Thank you for attending and taking time to attend this session, ma'am.
Of course. Madhu is wonderful, so thank you for making it possible.
Yes. We're just waiting for a few more. We'll start at 7, right, Kunal?
Yes, we will start at 7.
Okay, good. Can you just confirm when the live will go? Live streaming will get started so that I'll check. Wait.
Recording has started. I'll ask for live streaming.
Yeah, on YouTube, yeah. Super awesome. Okay, so ma'am, we'll start with the introduction and everything, and then you can take over with the talk that you want to give, and then we have few questions. So we basically circulated a form, and we asked the participants what they want to know from you and what if they have some questions. So we have that too with us, and if you don't mind, at the end we can have some question Q&A kind of session where I'll ask you some questions and you can answer them.
Of course.
Super great. Also, if you guys have any questions in between the session, you can just write it in the chat box and I'll make sure to pick it up. Okay. So don't shy away from asking any kind of questions. Yes.
Madhu, would you like me to jump in or hold off a little bit?
Sorry, ma'am?
I guess we can start because we are recording as well and we are short of time. So I guess we'll start and we'll compensate in the recording, I guess.
Perfect.
Cool.
So if you don't mind, I would love to share my screen. It looks like the host has disabled screen sharing. So if there's any way that I could share my screen, that would be awesome.
Yes, ma'am. Just a moment. I'll ask the host to do so.
And also, Kunal, can you ask him to start the live streaming on YouTube as well?
Yes.
Cool.
Just a moment.
And ma'am, before you take over and share your screen, I would like to introduce you to everyone here. Would you like give me that chance before that?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, super great. As soon as we start the live streaming, I'll begin. I'm checking it right now.
Here we go. Does anyone have any fun weekend plans? Oh,
okay. Yeah, so we are live right now. Hi, everyone. Good evening to all the participants present in the Zoom as well as who are watching us live on YouTube. Hope you all are doing well. Welcome to today's talk. And seriously, I couldn't be more excited for you all to meet today's speaker. I have got the chance to interact with her before, and she's a super amazing and kind person. So, without any further ado, let me introduce you to Jamie, ma'am. Jamie ma'am is the founder and host of Flame Bearers. So, what is Flame Bearers? Flame Bearers is a storytelling platform celebrating the journey of women Olympians and Paralympians. On the podcast, we get to listen to women athletes talking about their journey, their dream, their struggles, their hope, and their life lessons. And why is this special? So let me tell you that very less coverage of sports media goes to women athletes. and I'm talking less than 4 or 5% here. So we are. So how are people going to be aware about these achievements, their issues, their struggles, and everything related to women's sports? That's what Flame Bearers does. Over the podcast, Ma'am invites athletes from known and lesser known sports from all over the world. On the podcast, athletes get a voice, and that's why people love it. A few days ago, Flame Bearers won the listener's choice in two categories. First one being diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the second category being public service and activism at the prestigious Signal Awards. So, with many congratulations, I would like to welcome Jamie ma'am at IIT Madras BS degree. Welcome, ma'am. We are really happy to have you here. And if you could just take over. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, Madhu and team, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I'm Jamie. It is my morning, so if you see me sipping coffee, that's what's going on. I know it's the end of your day, so thank you all for making the time to join me. So just to start, has anyone here, and you can just raise your hand as a little blue hand, has anyone ever participated in a big competition and won a really important game? It could be in any sport. I know I definitely have. Yeah, we've got a couple people. Now, how about, has anyone ever been sidelined by an injury? It could be a hip, a knee, an ankle, and had to rest out the rest of the season because they were unable to participate. I definitely have too. So Flame Bearers is there for our female athletes, whether you are lifting a trophy in success or raising a leg to recover. We are the first storytelling platform specifically for women Olympians and Paralympians, and we cover the human, the athlete, not the sport. As Madhu said, less than 4% of all sports media coverage goes to female athletes. And if you are not in the majority race or religion or ability, you're not going to even be in that 4%. So pretty much the only people who are getting their stories told are people in the most popular sports who practice the common religions, who are the dominant race. So we're trying to change that. And also how we tell the stories is different. So historically, women are kind of sexualized. They're talked about their outfits. They're talked about how they look when they're performing, things that are not really actually important to the women themselves. So we're trying to produce each athlete's favorite piece on her ever done. So who am I? We started off as a podcast 3 years ago. We have now grown into the largest storytelling platform in the world specifically for this demographic. So again, that's women Olympians and Paralympians. We tell stories via podcast, short form video content, and live and virtual events. But how did we get there? I want to help connect the dots because I know there's a lot of people here who are interested in entrepreneurship. So my journey has been connected by 3 main attributes. So the first is curiosity, the second is community building, and the third is a love of sport. So growing up, I was an athlete. I played 3 sports in high school, and then in college, I played soccer. Many of my highest highs and my lowest lows and some really awkward, cringeworthy moments, but also super teachable moments had been through sport for me. And I realized it was something that I really loved. My background is in media communications. Before I went to graduate school, I worked in the media space. So I was working in ads, editorials, in audio, in visuals. So really learning how you tell stories compellingly and get people to care. And then I went to business school at Dartmouth, and I got it was an MBA, and then I went to Harvard and I got my master's of public administration, which is where I started Flame Bearers. Now, if I'm going to be completely honest, and I want to do that, there was 2 things that kind of helped me get this off the ground or inspired me to go in this direction. The first was the passing of my father. So about 5 years ago, I lost my dad to brain cancer. And that was really a turning point for me professionally, because up until this point, I had very much largely worked in large corporations, had a boss who had a different vision. And I think when I lost my dad, I personally felt that life was too short to work on something that I didn't really love. So for me, that was really inspiring to be able to say, no, what do I care about? What is it that is going to inspire me and get me up every day? And I figured out that it was storytelling for female athletes. The second turning point for me was when I was a graduate student at Harvard and the pandemic hit. So what's interesting about entrepreneurship is you have to kind of bob and weave with what happens. So this was actually, Flame Bears was the adaptation of an internship that I had been pitching to the International Olympic Committee. What's kind of funny is I think so rarely do people get to see behind the scenes, and I want to be really transparent about where this came from. So the International Olympic Committee, which is the governing body for the Olympic and Paralympic movement, has done a lot of work around elevating women in sport. But frankly, I don't think they do a good job of telling people about it. So they've done a lot of investing in female athletes and investing in diverse athletes and staff, but no one knows about it. So my background, I said, hey, I can help tell the world all the awesome things you've done. I was about to go make that happen, and then COVID happened. So essentially, COVID was a pivot from the role that I was hoping to have at the International Olympic Committee. I was not ready to hold off 2 years when the games were postponed to. And I said, I'm at Harvard right now. I have resources, I have funding. I'm going to start this on my own. So Flame Bears, which started in podcast form, started off as an opportunity to bring people together, to learn about people who are different than myself, and to share their love of sport. It really started with the idea of wanting to understand what ignites our world's best athletes and to really focus on what they care about as athletes and as people. So what do we actually do? We tell their stories in the ways that they want them told. On the left, this is Mansi Joshi from India. She is currently number one in singles and doubles in para badminton. We worked with Mansi in season 1. We're also working with her again this season. We also had the opportunity to bring Mansi to the Harvard Graduate School campus to actually be a keynote speaker. What we're doing matters to the athletes because Mansi told me that after she heard her episode, she didn't realize how similar athletes around the world are. She said that I've had my struggles, but I didn't realize that I could connect to women on the opposite side of the world who are also going through different issues, but they could relate to each other because of that. On the right, we have Sophia Herzog. She is a Team USA Paralympic medalist. She has dwarfism. And what she said is after she heard her story, she started crying because she said she never felt so seen before. She said most people look at her and because she looks a little different, they kind of ignore her, but she's an incredible athlete and she felt really humanized and valued by the story we told. Okay, so what is to come? As Madhu kindly shared, we recently won 4 different awards in the podcast, 2 different awards, and then 2 Listener's Choice Awards in the podcasting space. This was a huge honor. We were very excited about this, and this matters to us because we're in the process of pitching to corporate sponsors. So we're trying to get sponsors to cover all of the costs of me and my team and all of the production from an audio and visual perspective. We are going to the Super Bowl. So for those who are not familiar, I know football is a huge event and sport in the United States. I know it's not super big in the rest of the world, but it is the largest sporting event in the United States. So what we are doing is we are hosting a panel of female flame bearers to share why there is no equivalent for women in the sporting space. So we're creating that space for women at this large event. And we're talking about what does it mean to be an elite woman in sport? And frankly, what can we do in the future to make sure that there are more spaces for elite female athletes to come together? So we're bringing 3 different flame bearers together to Arizona, and we're very excited about that. In the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see a picture of a soccer player. For those who are interested in the sport of soccer, you're probably familiar that the Women's World Cup is coming up. We are pitching a video series to Netflix, to Hulu, to Amazon, to Apple, following hopefuls who are trying to make the national World Cup team. So essentially, this is, again, another form of storytelling. How do you actually bring these women's stories to life? And we're absolutely going to continue with the podcast because that has largely been our bread and butter and where we've been successful to date. But we are also going to continue to move into other forms of storytelling. I mentioned we're continuing with the podcast. We're currently in season 3. Season 1 was covering athletes who were trying to go to Tokyo. So that's the Summer Olympics and Paralympics. Season 2 was athletes going to Beijing. So that's the winter. And then this season is actually what happens after the games. So essentially, no one talks to these athletes once the cameras go home and the fans go home. And we think it's really interesting because guess what? In order to get to the games, they have all the work that goes in beforehand and after. They have to recover. They have to get back on their training. So we're telling those stories now. And we're in the middle of that season. So we're absolutely continuing with that. The last thing that we have to look forward to is the Flame Bearers Fellowship in collaboration with WomanX. So what this is a free opportunity for anyone. So if anyone here is interested in this, definitely happy to share the link to apply. It is a free 3-month program where we help arm you with digital storytelling skills. So we bring in experts from around the world in photography, in journalism, in social media to help equip you to be able to tell whatever story you care about in a passionate and engaging way. So I can follow up and share the link with anyone who's interested. Applications are due Monday, but it's a free 3-month program, and we're trying to build a community around that. So I'm really excited to be here. I hope that you can feel and understand my passion related to this cause. I really do think it is the future of sport, and we're hoping to create a more inclusive environment where little boys and little girls can see and hear people who look like them. I think it's really hard for people to be what they can't see or hear. So we're trying to elevate voices who have historically not been heard or not been seen. So children moving forward have the ability to say, hey, I can do that too. So thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was so interesting, and we can feel how passionate you are about sports, and we can feel that fire within us also. And all the things that you mentioned on the last slide was very exciting, to be honest. We are really excited for the upcoming projects for Flame Bearers. It was really amazing to hear about all those things. Um, we have few questions. Can we start with that?
Absolutely.
Okay, super amazing. So you said about football, right? So sports in India is like a festival. So we have players playing badminton. You mentioned badminton is like a household sport for us because every time winter comes in India, we just go out of our home and play with our sisters, our parents, and everyone. So sports is like a festival for us in India. And we would love to know what was your relationship with sports and what inspired you basically to start a sports podcast. You said you played yourself various kinds of games, but what like initiated that thing like, okay, I want to do the sports podcast?
Yeah. I think when COVID happened and I realized that I wanted to create something that brought people together, I think sports are a great unifier. So I think there's everyone across all languages and all regions of the world can get behind and can relate to sports. And in terms of why a podcast, I couldn't travel because of COVID. There were no live events. So I was trying to think, what is a easy way to connect with people who frankly have a super low bar of just needing internet service? So it's not like video where you need a higher quality of internet. I'm saying, okay, in my mind, how can I reach the most people and bring them together in a way that I think the most people can understand? So that's where the idea of a sports podcast came from. Personally, as I mentioned, I grew up playing pretty much every sport I could. I was a college soccer player. But even to this day, I'm running a marathon in 2 months. I'm a yoga instructor. Sport is a big part of my life. That said, humbly, when I'm talking to these athletes who are literally the best in the world, I don't lean on that identity as an athlete. They completely put me to shame. So in that vein, I position myself as a storyteller, as a digital media expert. But personally, in my own life, sports have played a huge role and continue to do so. But when I'm talking to these people who are literally the best in class at whatever sport they do, I actually try to kind of downplay that part of who I am.
And now, ma'am, you have listeners in more than 45 countries, I guess.
Yeah.
That's really big, to be honest. And everyone can listen Flame Bearers on Spotify, Apple, and there's a YouTube channel also, like I was exploring. So what other platforms are you guys on, if you could tell us?
Sure. So all of our podcasts are live on all podcasting platforms. So that's Spotify, Pandora, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcasts. We're on all social media. Actually, all is not correct. So we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. We are not on TikTok yet, so we need to get on that. We are also on YouTube. And those are the main ones. We're trying to explore other mediums. So if people have new ideas, super open to that.
Yes, absolutely. That's amazing. So now we would like to know how has been your journey as an entrepreneur and how it started. You said like you were the part of Harvard Kennedy School where this idea actually started. And how has been your journey as an entrepreneur in general? And what one advice would you like to share with our budding entrepreneurs here?
I love that. Here, I'm going to send the information to the fellowship in the chat for anyone who's
for sure.
interested. It's been really hard, if I'm going to be completely honest. People usually just see the positive side of entrepreneurship. It's you just see success cases. I would say it's also very lonely. So I guess the one piece of advice I would say is just mentally prepare yourself to work your butt off and to know that there's going to be ups and downs. I would say a large part of my success was driven by the mentors and team that I surrounded myself with. So during my time at Harvard and after, I enlisted a close group of mentors, so professionals who are older than me, who are frankly more skilled than me, who have been in the space longer than me. And I worked with them as almost an advisory board. So I would schedule weekly or bi-weekly meetings with them. And I would say, hey, I'd come to every meeting with an agenda to make sure it was a valuable meeting for them. And then in every meeting, I would walk through questions that I have that were outstanding. And I would kind of almost think of them as my own personal board of directors. And that was really helpful because it made the work feel like it wasn't just me in the beginning. It was just me in the beginning, but it made it feel like it was not because I had other people who were helping and guiding me. So that's definitely something that I would 100% recommend doing. The other thing that was really helpful was following up with people who I had stayed, kind of drifted out of contact with. So following back up on all of those old emails, all those old contacts with people you've worked with, who you've met years ago, but kind of let the communication go. People who I thought are good colleagues, good friends, just keeping in touch and always just letting them know what you're doing because you never know where ideas are going to come from. I recently had multiple people reach out to me and say, hey, I've been following your work on LinkedIn, or I've been following your work on social media, or I receive your email communications. And what I think you're doing is really cool. Have you thought about reaching out to this partner? Or I would love to work with you. And they wouldn't even know to reach out if I hadn't been in touch in the first place. So I think the other tip is just to widely canvass and share what you're doing with as many people as possible, because you never know where your next lead is going to come from. And then the third tip I would say is to just continue to focus on what it is that you want. I mentioned that entrepreneurship can be a bit lonely. It's very tumultuous in terms of ups and downs. It's different than it being in a corporate environment where you have a clear trajectory. You go into this job and then there's a B, C, D. Entrepreneurship is different in the sense that there's not a clear path. That's why I love it, though. I think it's more exciting. I think it's you blaze your own path. If there's something that you want to do that hasn't been done before, you can do it, which I love. That said, I think focusing on why you're doing it is a constant reminder for me that keeps me grounded. So the third tip would largely be help remind yourself of why you got to do what you're doing, because at the end of the day, when times do get hard, it's really nice to have that North Star and saying, well, I'm actually making a difference for people out there. And therefore, when I'm cranky, when I'm grumpy, when I'm up working late at night, it's worth it, because Monsi or Sophia, those two athletes on the slides, I made a difference for them.
That's so true. And ma'am, that's how I met you. Like, I was like, hi, ma'am, I heard your podcast and I loved it. And that's how I connected with ma'am. And truly, it's truly important to like be connected with more people as much as you can. And that can really help you out. So, ma'am, what is like one motivation for you to keep going, right? Because how to keep yourself consistent? Like, say you have an idea, you was working on it, but you said it's a roller coaster ride. It always doesn't work out for you, right? So how to keep yourself consistent?
Oh, that is the $1,000,000 question. I wish I could say I had it down pat. I have a lot of strategies that help me, but I would say it is not super consistent. What I do is I make a schedule for myself. The night before, I actually write out my calendar, because I don't have an office where I go in and meetings that I force myself. So I make my own schedule and I force myself to get up. I also have checkpoints in over the course of the day where there's meetings that I can't blow off. I have to go, I have to show up, because someone is counting on me to. It could be an interview, it could be a call with someone like you. And those meetings hold me accountable to make sure that over the course of the day, I'm not just meandering around, doing something else, going on YouTube, going on social media. They actually force me to stay accountable. And then I would say the last thing is having consistent communications where you actually make goals for yourself and you say, by next week, I will have achieved A, B, and C. So then when people, and I will actually ask my mentors or my friends to check in on me and to hold me accountable and say, hey, Jamie, did you do this? You told me you would do this last week. Have you actually done it? Because when you actually verbalize something, it helps me hold myself more accountable for it.
Yes, true. Like there are so many things about being consistent, being true to yourself, being true to the idea that you are working on. But there are also so many myths, right? So if you start doing this might not happen and you will not get partners. There's an idea, you shouldn't work on it, this won't work. So like there are many myths in entrepreneurship. Can you share like one myth that is not true about women entrepreneurs or entrepreneurship in general?
Sure. So well, I'd say the first myth is that I think the statistic is like only 2% of entrepreneurs. I'm gonna, don't quote me on this, but it's like only 2% of entrepreneurs are like successful in their first venture. So I think the myth that everyone's like, oh, I'm gonna create a business and it's gonna take off and I'm gonna be the next Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk. I think that is something that should be tempered. In terms of female entrepreneurs, there's so few of us. It's increasingly more so, but I think there's a huge misunderstanding in terms of like who actually are common entrepreneurs. And come on, ladies, we need more of us. If you look at venture capital funding in the United States, less than 4% actually historically has gone to women entrepreneurs. So we definitely need to get that number up. And that starts with you literally just having an idea and trying to make it happen, regardless of if it takes off or not. Trying to think of other myths. Those are the main ones that come to mind for me.
Yeah. So, talking about women entrepreneurs, do you personally follow some women entrepreneurs that inspire you in some way, or like any entrepreneurship idea that you like the most in recent times?
Sure. So I think it begs the question of how you define entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So for me, I think I tend to think of entrepreneurship a bit more broadly than most people do. So when I think of an entrepreneur, it's someone who is blazing their own trail, someone who is thinking outside of the box, someone who's really curious about the way things are and how you can do them better. So I think entrepreneurs can be people who maybe don't even start a company, but are doing something differently than how it's been done before. So one entrepreneur who I think of as an entrepreneur, who most people probably wouldn't, is Ashley Judd. So Ashley is an actress in the United States. She's been very outspoken about women's rights, and she was actually the person who really lit the fire under the Me Too movement. I think she's incredibly inspirational. I actually got the chance to work with her and know her while at Harvard, because she thought of what was happening in a different manner. Another entrepreneur who I really respect is Olivia Decker, who actually founded Discord, where Madhu and I had the chance to meet. I think she does an incredible job of bringing people together, of creating community, which is something that I really respect and value, and elevating diverse voices. So those are two examples of entrepreneurs who I really respect and admire.
Yes. Shout out to Olivia, ma'am. She's doing an amazing work, to be honest, and I'm also really inspired by her. So, ma'am, over the period, you have got the chance to interact with so many sports person. What lessons have you learned? If you can just briefly let us know, and like one or two more like life lessons from the sports person's life that we should incorporate in ours, what would that be?
Sure. This is so hard. I feel like you're asking me to choose between my unborn children. I love every athlete who I've worked with. I literally, my boyfriend tells me that I like every episode is like a love letter to the athlete, because I just think they're so amazing and I want them to feel great. A couple different things. I think the point that Mansi said in terms of being more similar than different is a big commonality. So the fact that every athlete, regardless of what continent they're from, regardless of what sport they play, regardless of what race, religion, language they speak, that at the base of it, they are all humans who have basic wants and needs and insecurities. I remember before my first interview, I was super intimidated to talk to these athletes. In my mind, I was like, how can I get them to think that I'm super important, that they actually want to open up to me? And I was really nervous. I had this whole inferiority complex in my mind. Here's someone who's won an Olympic gold medal. Why are they going to talk to this random girl from Harvard who is not a super athlete herself? And I think what I realized through all these conversations is these athletes are just like you and me. They've just chosen a different path. And they're really good at whatever that one sport is, but they also have weaknesses like we all do. So they're really good at badminton or soccer or track and field. But guess what? Like maybe they didn't do well in English class, or maybe they don't have many friends, or maybe they really struggle with A, B, and C. So the first thing is that realizing that people who I frankly put up on a podium and elevated above myself are actually just kind of like your brother or your sister or the person next door. The second takeaway that I had is that one of, if not the single most important factor that I think makes all these athletes so successful, is the value of resilience and grit. None of these athletes have had it smooth or great. They have all gone through really challenging, really tough times. And I think what separates the Olympians and the Paralympians from people who didn't make it necessarily is that they kept trying, they kept pushing. So when something did not work out, they didn't hang up their cleats or say, I'm done. They actually said, I'm going to use this as a learning opportunity to see what did I do wrong, where could I improve, and to actually get better. So I mentioned the World Cup series that we're trying to do. One of the athletes that we are hoping to feature, her name is Crystal Dunn. She was the last person cut from the Women's World Cup team in 2012. So she was literally the last person. She was on the national team, but she did not make the World Cup team. She was the last person cut. So she had to watch the World Cup from her couch all alone, watching her entire team play. 4 years later, she made the team. She's now making her third team, and she's a starter for the team. What separates Crystal from the 15, 20 other players who were cut is most of them quit. They said, I didn't make it. I'm never going to make it. I'm done. I've been wasting my time. But Crystal said, no, I was so close. I'm going to stick with this because this is my dream. This is what I want. And today, she's one of the most well-known, well-respected soccer players. But that's really hard. It's much easier to just say, hey, this is really tough. I'm going to walk away. But that's not what she did.
Yeah, the resilience and the attitude of keep moving forward, keep going towards what you want is like something that I don't know how every sports person has inbuilt in them. So they do follow everything that they want, and that's so amazing. You talked about your first podcast, right? Like you were so intimidated, and we want to know how was it like for you to how did you prepare yourself? Who was the guest, and how did it all begin? Yeah.
Sure. I will answer that. And then I also saw a question in the chat about first listeners. So I think those kind of go together.
Yeah.
The first athlete that I interviewed was not the first athlete episode that we produced. So essentially, when you produce content, I think it's really great to bundle it. So to get a bunch ahead of time, and then you can release multiple at once. So the first interview I actually did was with a para volleyball player. So it's called sitting volleyball. And her name was Nikki Nieves. She's actually one of the athletes who's coming to the Super Bowl with me. And her episode was specifically around her identity as a Afro-Latina. So her parents are from Africa and Puerto Rico. So she really wanted to focus on what does it mean to be a woman of color in the United States. And her episode came out just around the time of George Floyd. And I don't know if you have heard about what happened in the United States, but we struggle a lot with certain race relations. So her episode was talking all about her pride for being an Afro-Latina woman and what that means to her. In terms of how I prepared for that, I basically did a ton of research. I knew absolutely everything about Nikki's life. You could consider me a super stalker. And I say that proudly in the sense where I had followed and read all of her social media posts. I had read her blog. She keeps a blog. I followed who she follows to see what does she care about? Why does she care about them? Beyond researching her, I talked to a couple other people who had podcasts, and I said, hey, how do you actually conduct an interview? I read books about podcasting. I said, okay, if I don't know how to do this, I'm going to fake it till I make it. She's not going to know this is my first interview. But going into it, she had actually already seen the questions we were going to ask. That was a tip that someone else gave me. And they said, make sure that she's on board with what you're asking her before you show up. And then give her the space where if she has more things she wants to ask, to be able to open that up to her. In terms of how we got our first listeners, honestly, the people in your community and in your network are your hype squad. So I have a very close group of friends from high school, from college, from graduate school, who in the beginning were my teammates and were my hype women. They would post about my work on social media. They would post about it on LinkedIn, and they would celebrate our wins. So my first listeners were actually my friends and family. And that is kind of embarrassing to admit, but that's actually how most entrepreneurs get off the ground. They lean on the people who they know them, and then it grows. Every time they post that, one or two people would say, oh, that's interesting. What is that? they would click on the link and organically it kind of grew. I think one of the other differentiators for us was really the quality and making sure that the athletes themselves were happy. So then they become ambassadors for the brand. So again, our goal is to produce their favorite piece on them ever done. So at the end of the day, the athletes will share and support the work we do, which when they have a much bigger reach and audience than we do, it's great because then they share it with their entire community and they all get involved with Flame Bearers.
Yeah, and that's how the community grows. You share with your friends, they share with their friends, and that's how a community grows basically. And yeah, that's where also the communication you talked about earlier, the people you are connected with also helps, right? So that's really important, I guess. What's the mindset behind, like, while you are like, I heard the Manasi Joshi podcast, so those are like clips, certain clips you have merged them together, right, ma'am? It's not a continuous podcast. So what other things are going behind your mind, like, okay, so I have to do this so it will work well, so I have to add more podcast clips, or like some we have to invite some guests to make it more worthwhile. So what other things are behind your mind?
That's such a good question. The way we approach every interview is really we ask the athlete what they want to focus on. So we try to flip the basic and customary journalism model where a journalist comes in with a point they want to get across, and then they gather data to support that. What we're trying to do is we're actually trying to put the athlete in the driver's seat and give them the opportunity for us to collect data or things that support what they want to support. So with Monty, for example, I approached that interview and I said, hey, what is it that you want to focus on? And she said, I want to focus on disability bias in India. So then I said, okay, that's great. Who are a couple people or organizations who you would want in your episode? And then I gathered them and included their voices in the episode. So essentially it's her calling the shots and me doing the legwork to get the columns of support underneath her story. You mentioned that it's not continuous. So essentially in terms of process and flow, we usually interview the athlete first, and then we bring on the additional perspectives, or we call them contributing experts. So these could be people like Monty's sister, who's her manager. It could be someone from the Badminton Federation, which we did in Monty's episode, who can shed light on something that the athlete talks about. And the reason that's important is because we like to provide a 360 view on who these athletes are. I think so rarely do we learn about the human under the jersey, and we just see a name and a number. And I think really humanizing them and showing them from a multifaceted perspective gives people more insight into who they are. That said, it's a lot of legwork. So what I do is after every single interview, I then have to transcribe it, which means so I basically translate it into the copy. So I listen to it and I have it written. There's a program, so I'm not doing that manually, thank goodness. And then what I do is I stitch together parts of the interview. So essentially, once I have all of the interviews, so the athlete interviews, the guest interviews, I then sit down and I say, how do I make this story out of this? I have all the content, I have the pieces of the puzzle. Now I have to put the puzzle together. And that takes considerable time because you basically need to make all the pieces fit together, but you can use things like media clips or clips from the athlete competing or television clips with audio to help bridge the pieces. So I actually think it's really fun. It's kind of like art to me in the sense that you can be really creative with it. You can tell them in different manners, but the end goal is to tell their favorite piece ever done.
Yeah, and that's what makes it more interesting. You don't only listen to the sports person's perspective, you get to like understand the perspective of the people who have seen the sports person go through various stages, and an expert like going over all the situations that the athlete has been into. So that's what makes it more interesting, and that's why I asked that question also. Uh, Ma'am, everyone, we have live people in here. What is about this fellowship that would really help people to learn things about storytelling and everything? You said like storytelling is so important nowadays. Everyone has internet. Everyone is on internet. So if we could make their time on internet worthwhile by sharing stories that could like change the perspective of people, it will be really great. And that's what they are going to learn in the fellowship as well, like the art of storytelling. So if you could let us know more about the fellowship a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. So I think underlying all of this is the belief that we are all brands. So I'm a brand, you're a brand, everyone in this chat has a brand. And believe it or not, whether you are curating it or paying any attention to it, your social media is an extension of that. Anything you say, anything you post, people are making judgments about you. People are jumping to conclusions and saying, oh, I think Jamie is smart, or I think Jamie's stupid, or I think Jamie, I really don't like her sweater today. Whatever it is, people make judgments based on how I come across. So our goal is to help equip young leaders with the ability to share their story, whatever stories that they want to talk about, in powerful ways that gets across the message that they want. So what they will learn, what they'll actually learn, it's a 9-week fellowship. It's completely free. We're bringing in experts from around the world. Some of them are journalism experts, people who are world-renowned experts in that. Some of them are founders who have started their own companies and talk about how they use storytelling to get their company off the ground. Some of them are social media influencers, and they're going to teach us, how do you build a reel? What makes a good reel? What makes a bad reel? And the reason this all applies to every single person is because this is going to matter in your personal and your professional life. There's going to come a time when you're trying to get a job, you're trying to talk to someone, and you want to convey a point. And we're going to help you learn how to do that effectively.
That's so amazing. And ma'am, what's the last date to apply, if you can let us know?
It's the 23rd, so coming up, it's Monday.
Yeah. So apply soon. The link is in the chat box. Kunal, if you can put it on the Google, YouTube's comment section as well, so that people who are seeing me apply as well. Uh, Next question that I have was, there are many people watching us right now. So if you could recommend, they are going to explore flame bearers today, right? So if any one particular podcast you would like to start them with, so that they can like get a hang of what flame bearers is and what you are doing.
That is really challenging. I'm gonna give you 3. The first one, let's go with Deja Young's new episode from season 3. This is the episode that just won all these awards. So supposedly a lot of industry leaders out there think it's a very strong episode. To review, we won the Gold Award in the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion category for this. I think her episode so this is Deja Young's episode from season 3. I can share all these links in the chat. Focus specifically on postpartum depression. So she is a 4-time Paralympic medalist. She's a gold medalist. She also recently had a baby. And people expect athletes to always be happy, to always be on their game. And she talks about, no, actually, I became depressed after I had my daughter. And actually, it's been really hard and a real struggle for me. And mental health is something that most people don't talk about, and they assume if you're an athlete, you have it together. So her episode was really interesting for that reason. I would say Sarah Davies from season 2 had a really interesting episode. She is a British weightlifter and a beauty pageant queen. So holds 2 identities that a lot of people don't think go hand in hand. But clearly they do for Sarah. Her episode is specifically about her battle with the International Weightlifting Federation to fight corruption. So she's a beauty pageant queen who is working against the Weightlifting Federation because there's a ton of corruption in it globally, and she's single-handedly bringing them down. The third episode is because we have a largely Indian-based community, would be Mansi Joshi's. I think Mansi is absolutely incredible. I love her as a friend, as a colleague. I think she's absolutely amazing. So I can share all of those links in the chat.
Yes, amazing. Also, there are, all of us are like college students mostly, and everyone has an idea like entrepreneurship in India is like really big right now, and everyone wants to make on their own and want to start their own idea. So, any tips for them, like how to start a business, what are the things you should focus on, how to build a team, how to choose your team members, also, like any kind of tips you want to give?
Sure. First of all, go for it. I hope my points around this being challenging, this being difficult, are not dissuading you from pursuing your path. I just want to be really real about the challenges. I think very, very rarely are people talking about kind of the ugly side of things, and I think it's important to be 100% real about that. I think the number one tip I would say is surround yourself with people who have very different skill sets than you. One of the things I found during my MBA was that people tend to gravitate towards their friends when starting companies. They say, oh, we have a great time together socially. Oh, we have, we're good friends. But oftentimes teams are made up of people who are very different, who have skill sets that complement each other as opposed to are not the same. And I know with my friends, many of us are kind of similar. So I would say is that when you're building out a team, actually try to surround yourself with people who are different than yourself, because those will be people who will add value to the team and see your blind spots. So for example, I have teammates who have skill sets that I don't have, and I have skills that they don't have, and that makes us stronger together.
Amazing. We are about to end the session, and thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us today. We actually enjoyed a lot about knowing about Flamewares, about you, and everything. One thing you could tell us, like, how was your journey as a student, and like, what are the things you explored? Because we are like in that stage right now. We are like on studies, on like joining sessions, creating our building our skill sets and everything. What are the things that we should do to explore everything? Like, one thing is not enough right now, right, ma'am? So what are the things that you did on as a student and would love us to explore? So any tips on that?
Sure. Well, first of all, congratulations on being at such an incredible institution. Well done. That
Yeah.
is amazing. I would say that use this opportunity as, and think of it almost as a sandbox. So I think school is a very safe environment to fail, relatively more safe than if you are out in the real world, and are trying to start something as a company. I think school is a time where it's really safe to fail, because guess what? You are still getting a degree. You have support of the institution, you have your classmates, you have your colleagues. I think it's a great opportunity to try new things. So my advice would be to think of this time while you're at university as your sandbox, where you can play and try things and actually push yourself and say, hey, do I like this? I don't like this anymore. Try something different. So I think that's number one. I would also say use it as an opportunity to get to know new people. The people in your classes, the people in your dorms, if you live in dorms, are going to be future business leaders. So to really think of them as, yes, your friends, but then also your network, and not in a grimy or bad way, but as people who have skills that could be really helpful to you. So thinking about the people in your class as actually resources who you can learn from.
Amazing. That's all the questions that we got and we prepared. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. How was it for you, like talking to us, and anything, any kind of ending
I
words you want? Yeah.
I absolutely loved it. I was incredibly honored to join. It's interesting. So my first job out of college, I lived in Bangladesh, and I almost got to go to the
Yeah.
Sundarbans. I didn't get the chance to go, but
Oh,
one day I would love to visit. So it was a
please do,
pleasure
ma'am.
to speak with you all. I think what you're doing is incredible, and if I can be a resource for any of you, I'm happy to chat offline about my journey, anything like that. So happy to continue the conversation.
Yeah, Kunal, Bharvi, do you want to add something, please?
I guess a person from our audience wants to say something. Nitin, sir, please go ahead. You're muted, sir.
Okay. So yeah, hi. Thank you so much for. Thank you, ma'am. Uh, I want to just ask a simple question, which is happening with my life till today itself. 1 hour ago, how hard to leave a place to go somewhere else.
It's
You are
really
in.
hard.
I mean, I was in last. Actually, I am his this student teacher. I'm teaching him some courses on degree level. So sometime I have to leave from one place to another place. So I have to leave them and going somewhere else. How hard to leave things which you are comfortable for last time.
Very, very hard. Great question. It's extremely hard. What gives me the courage to do so is looking at people who have done it before. So saying, hey, Ashley's done it, Olivia's done it, all these people who are sources of inspiration for me. I think also focusing on what I want to go towards as opposed to where I'm coming from. So focusing on what you actually want. So what you're leaving for as opposed to what you're leaving is really helpful. So in my example, I left the corporate world and I had 8 years of work experience before going back and getting both degrees. And I said, I don't want that anymore because they were inflexible, because I was working on content I didn't care about, because I didn't like my boss, because all these different reasons. Instead, I'm going to focus on, I want to be my own boss. I want to create my own hours. I want to work on a vision and mission that I care about. So focusing on the good of what is to come and what you're leaving behind helps give me the courage. I would say it's really challenging though. It's scary. There's going to be times when you're going to doubt, did I make the right decision? Maybe I should go back. And I think that's human and that's natural. I would just say, for me personally, I know if I didn't make the jump, I would always regret it. And I'm the type of person who never likes to live with regret. So for me, that also gives me the courage to make a jump.
That's so true, ma'am. Living with regrets is the worst thing. You should definitely try everything you want, to be honest. Yes. Yeah, Kunal, you want to add something?
No, I guess it was a very insightful session. Always nice to hear from someone who is building something or the other, because personally I'm very interested in whoever wants to build something of their own. And as Madhu mentioned, many of the students in India nowadays are being pushed towards entrepreneurship, and many of the colleges and institutions, like the traditional ones, the traditional system didn't allow for students to create their own companies or be founders of startups. But now there's a different wave that has come into India, especially like after 2 to 3 years after we have a lot of startups being built in India. So that's really great, and I'm sure all the students here who want to build their own startups are inspired by your work, ma'am, and they'll go on to build something great.
I'm rooting for you. And again, if I can be a sounding board, surround yourself with people who are going to challenge your ideas and make them stronger.
Yes.
Absolutely, ma'am. Absolutely.
Yeah, Bharvi, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us in. And just a small compliment, ma'am. You've got a very nice voice, and plus your skill of speaking. I mean, all of us were so engaged for the past 1 hour. You've got a really good skill when it comes to sharing your stories and when it comes to talking or giving advices too. And I think all the advices you gave us are going to be really helpful for all of us who might venture into the entrepreneurship world in the future. So thank you so much for sharing with us your very, very precious time and stories. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate it. I think my least favorite thing in college was listening to someone talk and them not giving you concrete advice. I was like, how does this relate to me? And they would give you really amorphous, vague advice. So I try to be very concrete and tactical. So thank you for saying that.
No, ma'am, you have been is giving us advice that actually made sense to us, that we would love to explore and want to work upon. It was really amazing interacting to you, ma'am. It was such an honor that you joined us today. Thank you so much. And we are really looking forward to the fellowship. I have applied. I would always encourage everyone to go for it. If you get selected, you're going to learn so much. So go ahead, apply for the scholarship, explore Flame Bearers, the work that ma'am is doing. It's amazing. Support as much as you can and just be a part of the journey of Flame Bearers. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Once again, a huge honor. I hope you all have wonderful weekends. I know it's Friday evening for you, so
Yeah.
I hope you all go have fun. Thank you again.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Kunal, we can stop the live streaming.
Yes.
Yeah, ma'am, thank you. Ma'am, we can end the session now. So thank you for your time.
Of
Bye,
course,
ma'am.
I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Yeah, bye, ma'am. Bye, bye. Thank you guys for joining in. I hope the session was a good one for you. Um, Hopefully you all enjoyed, you learned something and would implement that in your life. And do explore Frame Bearers, go to their website, explore their podcast, apply to the fellowship. It's actually a really good opportunity for you all, and I am applying, so I would definitely recommend you all to do that. And thank you so much for joining. You all can leave as well. Should we leave or like
I guess we should leave, and they'll end the live stream in a while.
that works? Thank you. Chalo, bye, bye, Sukunal, bye,
Bye.
Bhairavi. See you guys.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.